All right, so it is time to check in with one of the most successful right-wing grifters in American history, Alex Jones. Now, I probably don't need to give too much of an introduction to you guys in terms of who he is. He's obviously a very well-known conspiracy theorist. He's peddled conspiracies, everything from chemicals in the water are turning frogs gay, all the way over to much more serious things like him calling the Sandy Hook massacre, where a bunch of innocent children were killed in a school shooting. He said that it was a false flag event. He said that the family members of the victims, that they were crisis actors basically, and so this all led to a couple of court cases that these family members were bringing against Alex Jones because they were facing an absolutely massive wave of harassment from his viewers because he was telling them over and over and over again that they were faking it as some sort of a grand plot to try to steal Americans' liberties. And so thankfully he lost a bunch of these court cases, and he's now going to have to pay out some settlement to these families as a very bare minimum accountability basically. But that ties into the story that we're going to get into right now, which is that Alex Jones has made an absolute killing off of the grift that he has been doing for years now. So here from the Huffington Post, they say that Alex Jones' InfoWars store made $165 million over 3 years, records show. So this is coming at a time where Alex Jones is going out there, he's begging people for money, he's saying that, you know, the global elites are crushing his show and that he barely has enough to survive. Meanwhile, you see what he's actually making here, okay? $165 million fucking dollars just from his store, okay? Just from his store, which, as we're about to get to, he's basically just selling a bunch of like fraudulent products, right? He's basically just a snake oil salesman at the same time as he is a deranged right-wing propagandist. So let's just go ahead and get into some of the details here. They say, for years, the conspiracy theorist and disinformation peddler Alex Jones has told his supporters that the only thing keeping his media empire afloat is their financial backing. And he said, we got a quote here, as much begging as I do, we can barely pay the bills, Jones told a caller on Thursday during a segment on his radio show promoting the InfoWars store. I'm not going to stop growth and let them push us backwards. I need your help, Frank. I need your help. And they say, despite his pleas for money, InfoWars store, where Jones sells an amalgamation of dietary supplements and survival gear, and we're going to get to some of the specifics here because the shit he's selling on his store is just absolutely laughably ridiculous, but he made $165 million in sales from September of 2015 to the end of 2018, according to court filings related to a lawsuit Jones recently lost over his lies about the 2012 Sandy Hook school massacre. And the records, first obtained by the Huffington Post, give the clearest picture to date of the financial situation of the InfoWars website and Jones himself. And the records also provide a window into how vast and powerful Jones' reach is and may provide clues into how he funds his political activities, including his participation in the U.S. Capitol attack on January 6th, where obviously he was helping to bring people there, he was helping to rally people there, he did an entire speech there, and I can't say that he was intentionally advocating for people to go commit violence, but it just shows how wide his reach still is, even years after he has been taken off of most of the major platforms. But they continue here saying, with another quote, saying, "The enemy wants to cut off our funding to destroy us," Jones said in a 2018 broadcast, "and if you don't fund us, we will be shut down." And that same year, the InfoWars store made more than $56 million in sales. So again, he's begging people. He's just a typical grifter, right? He's coming out here, he's acting as if he's on the verge of bankruptcy, and meanwhile, he's literally making tens of millions of dollars, basically hawking completely bullshit products to his viewers as some sort of a grand uprising of American patriots to push back against the elites that are trying to take him down. But just to give more perspective in the relation to the Sandy Hook cases, which is really where this is the most important in my opinion, they say that Jones lost every case against him levied by Sandy Hook parents after two separate judges delivered default judgments against Jones over his inability to provide internal company documents and emails related to the case, and juries will be convened in 2022 to determine how much Jones will ultimately pay to the parents. So again, that's the key part here. We're going to find out later this year how much he actually owes to these parents, but with data like this, obviously he is not short for cash. So I genuinely hope, although obviously it's nothing compared to losing a child, that these parents actually get some sort of retribution for what they had to go through because of Alex Jones and his misinformation. But they continue here with more context for the Sandy Hook cases, saying that the months of September and October 2015 saw a handful of orders a day, but just 1 year later, the InfoWars store was making an average of about $110,000 per day. And some of Jones's most profitable days were ones where he pushed his Sandy Hook lies. So again, I think that these parents, bare minimum, given what they have had to go through, should be entitled to a lot of this money, if not all of it, okay? Because again, his biggest days, or some of his biggest days, are when he's going out there and telling these lies about the families of people who had just had their kids fucking massacred at school, okay? And he's going out there and telling these lies and literally making over $100,000 a day while doing it, okay? It's just absolutely disgusting. But just to give you a perspective in terms of what he's actually selling to people, because on top of like the context of, encouraging your supporters basically to go and harass innocent families that had just gone through the worst thing that anybody could possibly imagine. On top of that, he's also just selling bullshit products, okay? These are not even products that work, but they give a couple examples here saying that Jones's boisterous carnival barker persona has made him the perfect mouthpiece to peddle bogus and often overpriced items. Some of the top selling products on the InfoWars store include Brain Force Ultra, a dietary supplement that contains green tea leaves and costs $37. There's also Winter Sun Plus Vitamin D, another supplement on sale for $19.95, and his Brain Force Ultra, not to be confused with the Brain Force Ultra, is also a top seller, his Brain Force Ultra Plus. And the store also sells an array of survival gear to those itching for a government collapse, a topic Jones often waxes on about. And there's storable food, radios, camping gear, and books about living off the grid. And Jones also sells water and air filtration systems, tapping into the fear he has culminated amongst his supporters to guide them to his products. So again, you see what the grift here is, okay? He's pushing so much like fear and anxiety and centering his entire show literally around this concept that there is like an evil global cabal of elites that are trying to target American conservatives, okay? Which, listen, I get it, and I get why some people fall for the traps of Alex Jones, because this is what a conspiracy theorist and this is what grifters often do, is they'll give like a tiny nugget of truth within what they're saying, right? So Alex Jones will come out and he'll rail against Nancy Pelosi, or he'll rail against some of the elites within Washington, D.C. Sometimes he's even gone against Republican establishment members, and he'll go after them in ways that sometimes make sense, right? And then he'll basically use that as an opportunity to pull his supporters into these completely deranged areas that have no basis in reality at all, right? It is true to say that there is a global cabal, if you want to call it that, of elites around the world, and that's just, the reality of capitalism. That's the conspiracy is just the capitalist system and those that perpetuate it and those that are at the top of power within the United States and around the world, financial systems that have their fingers on the levers. But it's not a conspiracy theorist in the ways that Alex Jones is trying to get people to believe, as in there's some like, ethereal vampire blood-sucking children-eating elites or something like that. They take nuggets of truth and then spin it in a completely ridiculous direction. So that's all part of this grift and trying to get people to be extremely fearful and anxious all the time, so that you can then turn around and in the middle of your show, while they are on the edge of their seats, turn around and tell them to go and buy your survival gear kits, or tell them to go buy your like Brain Force Ultra Plus or whatever the fuck supplements to keep themselves sane. So here's another just a perfect quote that encapsulates exactly what type of grift this is. But he says, quote, "Want to trigger the left?" he said on his show in November. The New York Daily News reported, "Exercise your First Amendment, get an InfoWars t-shirt, stand up for the InfoWars." So again, this is just another, a typical thing that they do to try to grift off of their supporters. And this is something you could also see amongst like Steven Crowder and Ben Shapiro and a bunch of other right-wing grifters that are even still on the major platforms, is that, this is their whole thing, is just trigger the left. That's all they care about. They want to trigger the left. They don't care about the actual substance. They don't care about the actual policies. They just care about triggering the left, and they'll use that as an opportunity to go and sell their products. I mean, what the fuck does this even mean? Exercise your First Amendment, get an InfoWars t-shirt. I mean, like, it's so ridiculous at face value. Exercise your what the fuck does the First Amendment have to do with buying an InfoWars t-shirt? I mean, like, literally, what is the connection there? There is no connection at all. It's just part of this entire grift that he is perpetuating here, and that many other right-wing grifters do as well. But I just wanted to take a look at some of the other shit that's on his store, because I was looking through this and it is absolutely wild. But some of his top selling health and wellness specials you see here: Ultimate Bone Broth Plus Formula. Bone Broth Plus Formula, what the fuck is that? Living Defense, Survival Shield, whatever the fuck that means, Down and Out. He's got a bunch of different shit that he is selling to obviously very anxious, like middle-aged conservative white men. And it's clearly working, because listen, again, the broader point in all of this is that, yes, he's making a fuck ton of money off this, $165 million over just a couple of years, right? This goes for all of these right-wing grifters. But on top of that, right, he's selling people these bullshit bullshit products. And on top of that, he was making the primary amount of that money, or a large portion of that money, off of the backs of conspiracy theories that had actual like material detrimental effects on real people's lives. So, I hope that there is some semblance of justice for the families that had to face the harassment due to Alex Jones and the type of disinformation that he was peddling and the conspiracy theories about them that he was peddling. But, in the broader picture, it's obviously not going to be nearly enough for what they've had to go through. But I do hope that they get to tap into some of those tens of millions of dollars that Alex Jones has made grifting off of his supporters.